What's up, everybody? The Hustle Lab is back with a workshop, and we chose this workshop because in our last workshop with Zane, where he kind of discussed building your business from a startup to a legal entity, right? An actual just from an idea to an actual business that's ready to legally take on customers and clients. We got a lot of conversation about business credit. There were a lot of questions about business credit. And I found that when I posted on Instagram, people were like, I hear about business credit. It's a buzzword. You're seeing people making videos, but you're honestly just really nervous to get started with business credit because you're not sure like who's responsible, how does that work, separating your business credit versus your personal credit. There's a lot of conversations about that, and Zane spoke very nicely, very thoroughly about how to build a solid legal foundation to set your business up for success. And so today he's kind of just going to help us go over, some of those legal responsibilities of that business credit that you may be seeking out to fund your business right now or in the future. So I'm going to kick it over to Zane. I'm really excited for this workshop. I hope to learn a lot. Zane, feel free to introduce yourself and take us right into the content.
For sure, for sure. So first of all, I want to say thank you, Akia, for inviting me back. I'm glad that the first workshop was useful enough information, and I'm glad that we got to have a follow-up conversation to really talk about what some of those other things that the entrepreneurs you're working with are thinking about and concerned with. And I know that this is a big one for folks. When it comes to funding your business, for a lot of us, we don't have like a bunch of money saved up in the bank, or we might not necessarily have, a rich uncle who can help fund all of our business dreams. But credit for a lot of us tends to be one of those ways that we can actually turn to and find a way to build our business from the ground up. But of course, as Akia mentioned, a lot of us have questions as we're getting started off. What are my responsibilities around using credit to build my business? And so that's what today's workshop is all about, looking at using business credit to build from a legal perspective and what that's going to mean for you personally, what responsibilities you're taking on, and some of the things that you should know as you use credit to build your business. And so I want to start off with the same way that I started off with our last presentation. And that's just a reminder that really, as we're building our business from the ground up, probably the biggest challenge for us as entrepreneurs is that we don't know what we don't know. And so I want to encourage everyone, first of all, congrats to you for showing up, or at least kudos to you for showing up to check out today's workshop. Gather some information, make yourself a better CEO. But in addition to that, I want to encourage you to really lean on the other people in your network, find experts and professionals who you can pull in to become part of your team. Akia is one of those people for sure. So if you're not working with her, she's definitely someone you should be working with. And I'm speaking from personal experience. But know who those people are who you can turn to get the advice that you need, so that you're not running into things, uh-ohs and making mistakes that you just really weren't anticipating, right? You don't want anything sneaking up on you. So with that being said, I'll introduce myself really quick. My name is Zane Johnson. I am the founder of MZA Legal. I'm an attorney, business owner, entrepreneur. And I think if there's one other thing that you should know about me, at least for now, is that I'm a huge fan of the underdog. And so I love to root for underdogs. I thought that this was something that was common for everyone. I thought everyone loved an underdog story. And then I met my father-in-law, who's a Yankees fan. And the Yankees, if you're not a big baseball fan, the Yankees have like 27 World Series championships. Like, they've got the most championships of any professional sports franchise in America. And so he is just used to rooting for winners, right? He loves rooting for Tiger Woods, and he loves rooting for, Serena Williams, and just all the other, athletes and teams, and Tom Brady, all the other athletes that win all the time. But for me, and I don't know if this is a Philadelphia thing or what, but I love to root for the underdog. So if my team's not in it, I'm rooting for the team that's not expected to win. And I point this out because it really it really informs the work that I do and why it's important to me. I work primarily with self-funded entrepreneurs to help them build a solid foundation for the future growth of their business, right? So everything from setting up business entities to reviewing contracts, to drafting contracts, to registering trademarks, to really just understanding what your intellectual property is and how to protect it and everything in between. And so my goal is to really help new businesses, new entrepreneurs, startups get to a place where they feel comfortable with all of the opportunities that they're looking to pursue, right? And so, my information is here on the slide. Please feel free to reach out if I can ever be of use. But we'll move on to the reason why we're really here, and that's understanding, again, the legal responsibilities that come with business credit. And I figured before getting into the actual responsibilities, there might be some folks who are watching, some folks who are watching later, who might have questions, not just about, once I have credit, what's my responsibility, but also what do I need to have in order to get access to credit for my business, right? Because we're talking about business credit, we're talking about credit that's going to be on the financial record for your business, and not just for you personally, right? And so what does it take? What do we need to have in place to make sure that we can get that credit in the first place? And so there are kind of four main things that I want to highlight in terms of those kind of requirements and things that you'll need to get a line of credit or to get a loan or whatever you're looking for in particular, to kind of get your business and on track in terms of building credit, right? Number one, you're going to need a separate business entity. And if you missed out on the last workshop and you're not sure what I mean with separate business entity, I'll explain it a little bit more, but definitely check out the last workshop to kind of get a little bit more into the details. But when I talk about a separate business entity, I'm talking about an LLC or a corporation in particular. So you're going to want to create that on the state level. And what that does is when you have a separate business entity, it's a separate legal entity from you as an individual, right? And so that business entity, that LLC or that corporation, can get credit in its name, it can buy property in its name, it can hold assets, right? And so that separate business entity is going to be necessary in order for you to open up any line of credit or to get a loan in the name of your business, right? Number two, you're going to need an employee identification number. And so to clarify, right, you can still get a credit card, right? You can still get a credit card that's like business related without an EIN if you're a sole proprietor. But as we get into talking about our responsibilities and, understanding the personal responsibilities of business credit, if you don't have an EIN number, and you get let's say a business credit card, is basically going on your personal credit, right? Because there's no separate legal entity that is taking on that responsibility in terms of that business credit, or that is, being issued that business credit. So if you're a sole proprietor, if you don't have an EIN number, an employee identification number, you don't have an LLC or a corporation, then that credit is just being issued to you, and it's not business credit, even though you may just be using it for business purposes, right? So you're going to need an EIN in order to get that business or get that line of credit into the name of your business.
And I'll chime in too, Zane, just super quickly. Basically, what Zane is saying here, the separate entity kind of makes your business like its own person, separate from you. Like it's you, the person, then it's your business. Two separate things. That EIN is like giving that person a social security number. So EIN is the social security number of your business. Super crucial. Also, it's not free to register your business with the state a lot of the times. A lot of times that costs. But an EIN, you go to the government's website, the federal government's website, and you can get an EIN for free. So get your business's social security number for free. If you don't have that, what he's saying is you'll have to put your own social security number and it will attach it to you, not your business. So you need to use your business's EIN or your business's social security number, for lack of better words, to get the credit in your business's name with that number. Yeah.
Thank you for translating that, Akia, because I know as an attorney sometimes I start talking attorney speak, right?
No, you're good. I get it because like I get it, but I know a lot of people out there like, what's EIN? So
Absolutely. So just like Akia said, an EIN is basically a social security number for your business, right? And so same as you need to provide your social security number to be able to get credit, in order for your business to get credit, you're going to need to provide that identification number that's going to allow you to get that, right? The third thing that you should absolutely have, and I guess it's not technically a requirement, but you should consider it a requirement, is a business bank account. The reason I say that is because at the end of the day, right, one of the reasons why we try to establish business credit as entrepreneurs is because ultimately we want to create some separation, right, between what we're responsible for and what responsibilities only belong to the business. And so having that separate business bank account helps you to create and maintain that separation, in particular when it comes to paying for things that are for the business, right? And so you don't want to be mixing your funds. You don't want to be mixing up, I've got one bank account and I'm paying the light bill and the phone bill and going on vacation with it, but I'm also buying office supplies and paying my employees and everything else for my business, right? You want to keep those things separate, and I'll touch on a little bit more why that matters as we move forward. But having a business bank account is an essential piece to really just maintaining your personal liability protection, which again, we'll talk about with some of the other slides. The other thing with having a business bank account is a lot of times that bank that you establish that banking relationship with is going to be the first institution to offer you a line of credit or a business credit card, right? And so thinking and being intentional about the bank that you choose. I know a lot is going on right now with regional banks, right? And some of the, panic around, whether or not they're safe and those sorts of things. Think of the bank that you choose to open a business bank account with as a business partner, right? And if you create a relationship with a bank that is, has your interests at heart and that you feel like you can work with and meets your needs, they'll be able to support your business as you move forward, whether you need a credit card or a line of credit or a loan. That'll be a place where you can go to kind of get those needs fulfilled. Last but not least is a DUNS number. And again, this isn't something that's like, well, I guess it's technically necessary. It's not a legal requirement. Like nowhere in the law does it say you need a DUNS number in order for someone to give you credit. But having a DUNS number is really what they use to track your business from a credit standpoint, right? And so it's, with same as you have a personal credit report and a personal credit history, your business needs to establish a credit history as well. And that DUNS number is essential to that. And so you get your DUNS number from Dun & Bradstreet. And so if you're not familiar with what that is, just Google Dun & Bradstreet. Dun is DUN and then Bradstreet, all one word for Bradstreet. And then it should pop up. You can register your business for free and then start, making sure that as you're building that credit, it's being reported and you're building a credit history. So now let's get to the question I'm sure everyone is really wondering, and that's who's responsible, right? So when my business is issued a credit card or a line of credit, or my business takes out a loan, who's responsible at the end of the day for paying that back? Is it just my business? Is it my business and myself? Who at the end of the day is responsible for that? And that brings us into this concept of personal liability, and in particular, how it relates to us and our business, right? So I mentioned at the beginning, right, that it's important to have a separate business entity if you want to get credit in the name of your business. The reason being, again, as Akia pointed out, right, your business and you are two separate legal entities. You're basically two separate people from a legal standpoint, right? And so what that means, the same way that the law, generally speaking, isn't going to hold me responsible for the debts and responsibilities that belong to another person. It's not going to hold me responsible for the debts and responsibilities that belong to my business, right? My LLC, my corporation. I own a business, but whatever debts that that business has don't belong to me personally, which means that my house, my car, my personal bank account, they're protected in case my business gets sued, right? Generally speaking. So the thing with the law, the thing to always remember is there's always a general rule, and then there are always exceptions to that rule. So the same way that in criminal law, where if let's say I give someone someone says, hey, I'm going to go break into a house, give me a hammer. So this is a bad example, but it's what comes to mind. They say, Zane, I'm going to break into a house, give me a hammer so I can, hammer the door down and break into this house. And I give them the hammer, they break into the house, they get caught, right? Even though I'm not the one who broke into the house, because I'm the one who supplied the hammer, I'm going to be held responsible, right? So there are exceptions to this general rule, the same way that there is, in criminal law, right? When it comes to the responsibility of one person for the actions of another, there's exceptions in the business side of things when it comes to the responsibility when it comes to your responsibility for the debts that belong to your business, right? And so stick with me here. I'm gonna bring it all back. Hopefully you're still with me and this is making sense. But when it comes to receiving credit for your business, right? Generally speaking, if you are opening a business credit card or if you're taking out a loan, if you're signing on behalf of your business and that loan or that credit card is being issued to your business, the general rule, right, is that your business is the one that's going to be responsible for that debt and that you're not going to be responsible for that debt personally. However, for most lenders, they're not comfortable with that, especially with newer businesses, right? If you're a newer business, you don't have a long history of, finances to look back on. They don't kind of have 10 years to kind of look at how your business has grown and get a sense for whether or not you're stable. A lot of times what lenders are going to do is they're going to want you to sign what's called a personal guarantee. All right. And so a personal guarantee means, okay, you are issuing this line of credit or you're giving this credit to my business. But I, as a person who is signing on behalf of my business, I'm also agreeing to cover the debts that my business might rack up under this line of credit and be held responsible for that. Right. And so again, it's something where, generally speaking, if the loan or the credit is being issued to your business, the law, generally speaking, wouldn't hold you responsible for that. But now, because the lender is requiring you to personally sign a contract saying, I am agreeing to be held responsible, now, not only is your business responsible for the debt, but in most cases, you will also be held responsible for the debt that belongs to your business, unless you sign up for a credit card or a line of credit that doesn't require you to sign a personal guarantee. All right. So in the event, again, personal guarantees are not always required. It depends on the lender, the type of credit that's being issued, and also your business's finance and credit history, right? So again, if your business has been around for 10 or 20 years, and you've got a building and you've got plenty of assets and it's very clear that your business is stable or maybe your business is even growing. In all of those situations, the lender might not require you to sign a personal guarantee. But the thing in terms of, having a personal guarantee, remember, it goes back to, again, talking about how that personal liability protection that comes with having a separate business entity typically would protect your personal assets, right? So your home, your bank account, your car, whatever other assets you own of value. When you sign a personal guarantee, what you're saying is, if my business goes under and my business can't afford to pay off the debt that I rack up, you are allowed to sue me as well, and I will be held responsible, and I'm allowed to be held responsible for as much of this debt as is issued, right? And so, that means that they're able to, attach a lien to your property, or they might be able to garnish your wages or garnish a bank account because you personally signed and personally guaranteed that debt. Okay, so this is probably the most important piece when it comes to the responsibilities of business credit, is being aware of whether or not you signed a personal guarantee when your business took on that credit, okay, or took on that loan.
And I'll chime in too right there. This is super important. This is something that I feel a lot of people just starting with credit kind of struggle to understand. I know I did when I started with credit. A personal guarantee, or sometimes on Instagram, you'll hear people say a PG, is essentially you established your business as separate, like Zane said, and he's like really spoke it to a T. You establish your business is legally separated from you. The credit card company, when you sign up for your credit card, is going to give you a contract that's basically asking you to agree to the terms and conditions of this loan. Like a credit card is essentially just a short-term loan, right? So they're going to say, we're willing to give you XYZ amount of dollars in credit if you're willing to agree to these terms and conditions. One of those terms and conditions that can be in that contract, which is often a contract that a lot of people just sign because they just want the card. You have to read and look for a personal guarantee and what the status is of that. If you sign up to be a personal guarantee, what Zane is telling you is you're waiving the separation between you and your business. You're basically signing up and saying, if your business goes under, you agree to personally take on the debt. That's why you have to really read your contract, because you have to see what you're exchanging for that funding or for that credit card. So in exchange for certain credit cards, they will ask you, if your business can't pay, we need to know that you will pay. If you sign off on that, if you become the PG or the personal guarantee for your business's credit card, what Zane is telling us here is that this business can come for your personal assets. So being aware of if the credit card asks for a personal guarantee or not should significantly impact if you're going to sign this contract or not, and how you're using the card, right? I mean, we should be smart overall financially with using credit and taking loans and stuff like that. That shouldn't be something taken lightly, but it is something to consider, because if you rack up a lot of debt on a credit card and you're a PG to that credit card, you're a personal guarantee to that credit card, even if your business can't pay it back, you're responsible for getting the money up to pay it back, or trading in your assets, or like liquidating your assets in order to pay the debt. So Zane really is breaking down here. Really what it boils down to is read your credit card contracts.
Absolutely. And I think, the other thing that I'll say is, in terms of, again, not every credit card, there are credit cards out there that don't require you to sign a personal guarantee or to agree to guarantee to pay back whatever debts personally, right? But a lot of times the ones that don't will have some form of limitation on them, right? So they might be, a net 30 account where you've got to pay it back after 30 days, or it might be something where you have to put up some form of collateral. So I've seen ones where you have to have the credit card linked to a bank account, and the bank account has to have a certain amount of funds in it. And so just be aware of that if you're, there's a trade-off. It might sound scary to have that personal guarantee or to make that personal guarantee, but if you're looking for a card that doesn't have that, you're going to have to make some trade-offs, because those lenders will want something to know, okay, if this business doesn't work out, there's something there for me to be able to collect the debt. And then again, another way just to think about this too is it's like having a co-signer on a loan, right? And so you, as a person who signs the personal guarantee, you're the co-signer for your business on that credit card, that loan, whatever it might be. So I want to kind of talk about this in the context as well as like some of the familiar forms or different types of business credit, right? So you've got credit cards, right, which are great because they allow you to increase spending power. So you can buy more things than you can necessarily afford right now, or pay for more things than you can afford right now and pay the balance down over time, which can also be, a good way to get yourself into some trouble. So you want to make sure that financially you understand what you can take on debt-wise for your business. And credit cards are typically going to require a personal guarantee, right? There are some that don't, but again, there's going to be trade-offs in those situations where they won't. Then you've got loans, right? And so loans are where, we're all familiar with what a loan is. Someone's giving you money saying, all right, you've got to pay back this money with interest over, X amount of months or however many years, right? Loans will often require a personal guarantee, depending on who you're getting it from, right? So, if it's one of these traditional institutions, if it's a bank, then unless you've got some form of collateral that you're willing to put up, right? You've got a building that you own, or you've got stocks or money in the bank, unless there's some collateral that you have that you can put up to cover the value of that loan, they're going to want a personal guarantee. But there are institutions out there that, are more flexible with their lending, right? And so when it comes to loans, it might be a little bit easier to find a loan partner who's willing to offer you a loan without a personal guarantee. But again, there's going to be trade-offs. And then last but not least, you have net 30 accounts, sometimes also referred to as trade lines. But that's basically where credit's extended by a vendor, a supplier, some other form of business, primarily for purchases with that business. Sometimes it might extend in other places, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to pay that. It's not something where the debt can continue to run, right? So if it's has to be, whether it's 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, that amount has to be paid back within that period of time, right? And so often there's no personal guarantee, but again, that's part of the trade-off, is that, that balance can't continue to go from month to month to month. You've got to pay it off at the end of that period. And so again, and I've mentioned this, but just to really drive the point home, lenders want to minimize risk. All right. And so if you're looking for something where you can, get a line of credit, open a credit card, get a loan without having to make a personal guarantee and only have your business be responsible for that, then a lot of times the lender is going to require you to put up collateral or show proof that the business is, has plenty of money to pay that back, right? Or at least has enough, operating time, right? So you've been in business, you've been operating for 10 years, 20 years, however long, and they can see, okay, over the past 5 years, here's how the business is done. Here's what things look like in the marketplace moving forward, and then the lender might feel confident being able to lend to you without that personal guarantee. So the last section that I kind of want to cover is just talking about, what Akia mentioned in terms of reading through your agreements, right? Particularly when you get a credit card, right? I know when we sign up for a card, really when we sign up for anything, most of the time we don't read it. And I'm not going to lie, I actually just got a new credit card recently, and I wasn't going to read all the terms and conditions because I kind of assumed that I knew it. And I was like, well, I'm preparing for this. I'm sure people are going to have questions, and I'm sure it will be helpful for me to read it and kind of look in there, what sort of things are in there that I might find surprising, right? And so I read through it, and I did find a couple of things that were surprising, but I say that to say I know that we don't always read all of the contracts and agreements and terms and conditions that we're asked to sign on a daily basis. It's a bad habit that we have, but in particular, when it comes to credit cards, it is really important that we read these agreements and that we know what's in them, right? Because there are a lot of things where you could get caught off guard. And again, we're talking about money here. So we're talking about really the lifeblood of your business, right? Like cash, having enough money to be able to operate and run your business is critical. Without that money, without that cash flow, you're not going to be able to stay in business very long, right? And so you need to really understand when you're applying for that credit card, if it's something that you're relying on to be able to do business on a day-to-day basis, what's in this? What am I agreeing to? Is there anything in here that might end up surprising me and might end up derailing my business? And even beyond that, is there anything in here where I might end up with a surprise that ultimately might, put me in the hole personally, right? And so that's something that we also want to make sure that we avoid. And so a few things that we want to look for, of course, we talked about the personal guarantee. The one thing that I want to point out when it comes to the personal guarantee is that in your credit card agreement, it's not necessarily going to say personal guarantee, right? So a lot of times when you sign like a loan agreement, there's going to be like a separate sheet where you've got to sign the personal guarantee saying, I personally, agree to, take on this debt and be held jointly and severally liable, lots of other legal jargon, blah, blah, blah. But when you get a credit card agreement, a lot of times they try to write those more so in plain English, so they don't use as much legal jargon, right? And so that clause might look different, and you've got to actually read it and read what things are saying to figure out and point out where that is in the agreement, right? So I actually took a look at mine, the one that I got a few weeks ago, and I don't know, I'm going to put this up to the camera, and so you can see in here, the personal guarantee says your promise to pay, right? And so again, it's something that can easily be overlooked if you don't know what a personal guarantee is or what it relates to, because even right in here, it doesn't say personal guarantee, it says your promise to pay. But when you read it, right, it says the business and business signer promise personally, individually, and jointly to pay us all amounts due on your account, right? So it's saying the business and the business signer are agreeing to pay back all the amounts that are due on the account, right? So again, it's important to read through that and try to understand what's in it, because it's not always going to use the same exact terms that you've heard before or that you are kind of on the lookout for, right? So read through the agreement. Don't just, kind of skim through looking for certain words. Make sure you understand what you're signing for, and make sure you take a look to see whether or not that personal guarantee is in there, right? Because obviously that's going to change the way that we think about using that credit, right? If we might be held personally responsible for that debt, or if someone might be able to come after our house, our car, our personal bank account, if our business isn't able to pay that debt back, right? Another thing that I want you to look for and pay attention for is whether or not there's a business purpose clause in your agreement, right? Again, I kind of talked about and touched on the necessity of having a separate business bank account, right? Keeping your business finances separate from your personal finances. There's benefits there from a tax perspective, right? Just to be able to write off expenses that are for your business, and get the tax deductions and benefits that come with that. But it's also important to realize that even if you are signing, or even if you are personally responsible for the debts that you rack up with your business credit card, a lot of business credit cards have a clause in there that says that you can only use that credit card for business purposes, right? And so it's important to understand that if you use it for non-business purposes, there may be consequences there, including sending your account into default. And so if your account goes into default, which is actually the next clause that I pointed out that you should look for, right? So an account default clause. So default means that you have violated the contract, right? So whatever obligations that you have within the contract, a default means that you violated the contract in a way that is material. So in other words, your violation of the contract is bad enough that we have to take action to rectify or to make the situation right. Am I explaining that in a good, like, non-lawyer way, Kia? Because it feels difficult to
No,
explain that and just
you
like,
are. I'm taking it all in. So what I hear, I'll pair it back to what I hear, and you let me know if this is correct. But basically, inside of the contracts, there's sometimes clauses that tell you you can only use this credit card for business related expenses and costs or bills or whatever. If you're found in violation, these people can choose to basically stop lending to you upon the credit. And then with the account default charge account default clause, what you're kind of saying here is like when they want to put a stop to your account, this is what it would look like. Is that kind of what you're saying? Does that make sense?
yeah. And so the other part to that too is that when your account goes into default, that's what allows them to actually come after you to collect whatever debt is still outstanding, right? So like, let's say, for example, and this is why it's important to understand and look in your contract and see what are the situations or what are the things that I would do that would cause my account or would cause me to go into default. Because when you go into default, and I'm glad that I have this handy because I'll just take a look and read and like read what they have here in this agreement, right? So what they have here is, let's see if I can find it. Okay, so what they have here is if your account goes into default, they have all the other things that you would think that they would be able to do, right? So close and suspend your account, lower your credit limit, but they can also demand that you pay the total that's owed and that's due. So the total that you've total balance, they can demand that you pay that immediately, right? So let's say you've got a running balance of a few $1,000s that you were planning on paying over the next 4 or 5, 6 months. And now they're telling you you've got to pay all this back immediately, right? Or they can continue, obviously, they can continue to charge interest charges and also additional fees. But the kind of worst case scenario is going into default is those are the situations in which they might actually bring a lawsuit against you, get a judgment against you, and then using that judgment, get a lien against property that you own, or they might, look to garnish your wages or garnish a bank account, right? And so you want to make sure that you understand those situations where if I do these 9 things, my account is going to go into default. And so these, the potential consequences there could be very serious for you personally, not just your business, right? Last but not least, and this is one that I wanted to include that you don't typically see in credit card agreements, but you're much more likely to see in a loan agreement, and it's called a confession of judgment. So yeah, I don't expect that you would ever see this in a credit card agreement. If you did, I would run from that credit card. Like I would not use that credit card. But with loan agreements, sometimes you see confessions of judgment, and a confession of judgment is basically where you are agreeing to waive your rights to due process, basically a hearing, before a court can issue a judgment to the lender to collect money from you, right? So the situation would be if let's say let's say I received a loan of $10,000 from a bank. I stopped paying the loan back. The bank could then, if I signed a confession of judgment, the bank could just go into the court that has jurisdiction, and without having to file a lawsuit and go through the whole process of having discovery and hearings and producing evidence and a trial maybe, they could just go in and say, look, we have this contract. They signed a confession of judgment. Here's our proof that they haven't paid. And the court will just say, okay, we're going to issue you a judgment then. And they can then use that judgment to collect from you, right? So to attach it to, property that you own, and potentially liquidate that to be able to, recover what you owe or garnish wages or garnish bank accounts, right? And so it's really important that that's something that you check for as well. Again, not something that I would typically expect you to see within a credit card agreement, but in loans, they're much more common. And it is it's a really serious, kind of uh, term to include in a contract. And so you want to make sure, I mean, they're not uncommon when you're taking out a loan. So if you ever are in that place where you see one of those, they're also not uncommon actually in lease agreements too. So like commercial lease agreements. But if you're ever in a situation where you're looking at a confession of judgment, doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that you can't sign or that you shouldn't sign. But again, you want to make sure you're going into things with eyes wide open, so that you're not signing anything that you're not prepared to, address.
So, just to kind of like chime in, and this is it's perfect. You were gonna move into questions. I'm putting myself in the mind state of someone who is looking to purchase a storefront or some sort of commercial property. So, are these also key points I should be looking for in that contract as well? Because I will have to deal with like a loan or some sort of leasing agreement.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Those are all things that you should consider, and all things that you should be looking for. But I always think it's a good idea, and a lot of people don't, but lease agreements. So if you're leasing a space, or mortgage documents, there I was thinking about this today when I bought a house for the first time. And I was a young lawyer. I'd been practicing law for maybe I was like maybe 2 years out of law school. And so like I'm all ready to like go to the closing process and sign for the house. And I'm like, I'm gonna read through the contract and everything. And I remember they handed me a stack of papers that was about as thick as this book. And I was like, and it was like 400 pages. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to read this today. So when it comes to mortgages, purchasing a building, leasing a building, it's really helpful to have someone actually review those documents with you. I think it's one thing with like a credit card agreement. They really do gear those towards everyday consumers. And so they try to put it in plain language. They try to make it shortened. They try not to include a lot of legalese. That's lawyer talk. But mortgage agreements, lease agreements, loans for purchasing property, purchase agreements. They're throwing all the legal terms in there just because. And so it is a good idea, I think, to speak with someone and have someone review those for you if there's anything that you don't understand. Because commercial lease agreements, commercial purchase agreements, or just purchase agreements in general, or mortgage terms, they're unforgiving, right? So like it's one thing when you are leasing an apartment. Because that's something that everyday people do. There's a concern for wanting people to not end up in bad situations. There's a lot of protections for people who are leasing something residentially. When you're leasing something or purchasing something commercially, it's not very forgiving. So if you don't understand something, or if you make a mistake, or you sign something that was a bad idea, there's going to be very little that you can do after the fact to kind of get yourself out of it. So you want to make sure that upfront you understand everything that's within that.
So, thank you so much, Zane, for explaining that. I just want to ask a final question. So, I know that I got my business credit card. I'm interested in some loans. What are my rights to be able to review those contracts before making the decision to sign? Do I have time to take it to MZA Legal? Like, how do I have to sign right away? What if I'm sitting right in the bank? Can I say like, hey, I need some time? Like, do I have agency with that?
Absolutely. So you definitely have time to get things reviewed. You definitely have time to, come seek me out. Most attorneys, well, I won't speak for anyone else. I know for me, if I'm reviewing a contract, I try to turn it around for folks and get them my feedback back within 48 hours if I can. If it's something a little bit longer, or if I just, if it's just a busy week, it might take a little bit longer, but you do have that time to be able to say, hey, let me get I want my lawyer to look over this, right? Or, I want the opportunity to review this, before I sign. And, so don't feel like you have to be pressured into signing anything right away. If someone is putting that pressure on you, what they're doing may potentially be illegal, right? And you should let them know that, because as someone who is, getting ready to enter into a contract, the term that we use in the law is called duress. And so it's basically the other side putting you under a stressful situation to encourage you to sign an agreement or to encourage you to take on some sort of obligation. And ultimately, if you're in that sort of situation and someone forces you to do something that really weren't sure, or you really didn't know if you had the time and you kind of just signed it because you felt like you were under pressure, that may actually be something that would serve as a defense for you in the event that you didn't fulfill your obligations under that contract, right? So it might actually provide a way out for you of that agreement. And so no one, don't allow someone to put pressure on you to sign something that you're not sure about. Take the time to read it, take it to your lawyer if necessary, but just make sure you understand what you're signing. You always want to go into any contract, signing any agreement, with eyes wide open.
Thank you for that, because I feel like a lot of business owners, including myself, especially when you don't come from backgrounds or environments that talk about credit or contracts and loans and what your rights are, a lot of people think like, oh my gosh, they just offered me $5,000 in credit. Like I never had this much business funding in my life. Let me hurry up and sign the contract. And this is where we're kind of like, okay, calm down. It's a great accomplishment, but is it worth it? Like weigh out the pros and cons for your own business, your own personal finances. Are you able to take on being a personal guarantee, as well as what did you have intentions on using this credit card for? So I'm a firm believer, right? Everybody asks me, why are you hosting these workshops? If you do marketing, you do social media marketing. Because when people invest into their business, you should invest in things that are going to bring you money back. So it's highly likely that a lot of people that I work with, including myself, when you're paying for that social media marketer, or you're paying for those social media ads, you may be using business credit, and using it safely is key.
Mhm.
And that's really all I care about, is protecting, like you said, the underdog, to understand like you have rights, you have time to review things. If you have questions, you should ask them. You should seek out the resources that you need to be successful, because it's better to do it right the first time than to get into contracts, be in dicey situations, put out a lot of money that you can't get back, and then you're stuck. You're a new business. You don't have time to incur random debts, or people coming to collect their money from you in a time you weren't expecting them to. So being like fully aware of your financial landscape and situation. And I think I'm a firm believer as well that all areas of business should talk to each other. Your legal department is working with your finances, working with your marketing, is working with your operations. They should all talk to each other. And that's what a healthy business is. So I'm super grateful for you, Zane, for taking the time. Thank you for everyone who's going to be tuning into the replay, who signed up for this webinar, who's on our email list. Both Zane and I have amazing resources coming out every week on emails. I was just going to ask you, how can people get in touch with you, Zane?
Yeah, so all my contact information is, here on the slide. You can shoot me an email, you can give me a phone call. You don't ever have to worry about if you call me and I answer the phone, are you going to get a bill immediately after. I will let you know if any of the time needs to be paid for. But all joking aside, I'm someone who tries to make myself very available to folks to just answer questions and be a resource. So don't hesitate to reach out. And also everything that you said, Kia, I agree with wholeheartedly. And it's one of the reasons I really enjoy working with you and the Hustle Lab, is because you really do care about your clients and your customers, and you want to see the people that you're working with win. And whatever you can do in terms of sharing the knowledge to help people do that, you do it. And so thank you again for having me, and for creating a space for us as professionals to share what we know with people.
Yes, it's no problem at all, Zane. You know how it is. We both root for the underdog, building businesses ourselves, startup entrepreneurs. So the struggle is we get it, right? We're here. But yeah, if you're watching this replay, make sure you hit Zane up. He's an amazing. I've been working with him as well as far as like getting my contracts together between independent contractor contracts or agreements, as well as like my own service agreements. Legal foundation for your business is essential. MZA Legal has helped me like a lot understanding my rights with intellectual property, copywriting, it like a lot. Like this is testament right here, is not paid, is not promotion, like it's really from the heart. MZA Legal is built for the startup entrepreneur that just really just needs to know what their options are. So thank you so much, Zane. You can look out for us on Instagram for Zane, MZA Legal. It's at mza.legal. And for Hustle Lab, it's at the Hustle Lab LLC. We're both on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. Zane, you're on Facebook too, right?
I'm on Facebook too, but it's
Not
not.
as popping as
Yeah,
Instagram.
the shop's gonna look real empty when you get to that.
Instagram's where the party's at. So find us on Instagram. And until next time, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, get on our email list, check us out, talk to us. But yeah, thanks again for tuning in.